Is doing that. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by former Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland, the Conservative MP for South Swindon.
Good morning.
Sir Robert.
Good morning.
Lovely to see you. You look chirpier than Teresa Villiers, because it's not been a great weekend for you guys, is it?
Well, I've had elections in Swindon. They were pretty tough for us as well. Some signs of revival, I think. What is happening is that a lot of voters who support us are not coming out to vote. They're on strike. They are sending us a clear message. Labour clearly got their tails up. Their voters are coming out to support their candidates, and you're seeing that differential turnout in local elections. Now, it's very different from a general election. At the moment, the polls look grim. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think what we need to be doing, instead of worrying about other parties, we should be making an alliance with the British people. You know, the Conservative Party has always been strong by being aligned with the British people. So let's talk about issues like housing, like making sure that we can provide homes for not just young people, but people in their late 30s who want to have a stake in our society, and really get us into a place where people feel they have ownership and they are involved in our national life.
The trouble is, home ownership has gone down under the Tories, Sir Robert. Well, this is the problem. People can't afford to get on the housing ladder. And you say you need to have a dialogue with the electorate. Is the electorate actually listening? Is the electorate just putting its fingers in its ears, going, enough already? 14 years of chaos, umpteen prime ministers in and out, got a prime minister with a 5-point plan, which people find patronising and annoying, that doesn't seem to be working.
Well, I think, first of all, elections are about the future. We don't get thanked on our record, but we do need to shout more about how far we've come on issues like the triple lot for pensioners, or on growing the economy. We still grew faster than most of the major economies in Europe.
It's not great growth.
Liz
Truss had a point, didn't she?
Of course she did, and I was a part of that government, and I think growth is a very important agenda for us. I think the Conservatives going into the election still can resonate if they actually talk about what people want to discuss, and they do want to talk not just about the issues like immigration, which are important, but they want to talk about issues about public services. Why can't our public services work better? We spend a huge amount of money on them. Let's make sure they're more efficient. And the issue that I've just mentioned about giving people a stake in our future. Now, if we are front-footed on that, if we are positive, not just talking about our record, which I think we need to do more of, frankly, reminding people we've come out of a COVID crisis that really exposed, I think, a lot of weaknesses in our public services, and come on to a bold agenda of reform there, with the offer of a sensible and
you're
sustainable...
Going for sensible. You're going down the street direction, because this is the big debate, isn't it? We've got Suella Braverman this morning saying we've got to urgently change course. She now regrets backing Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. Is that something you regret?
Well, do you know, no. I think that the time for talking about personalities and the party talking to itself is well over. That's why the British public are putting their fingers in their ears, because they just hear Tories talking about each other.
Unite or die. We unite or die. But where do you go from here? Because Andy Street is saying we must be very moderate. We must just not, veer from the path of moderate Conservative politics. And yet, at the same time, you've got Reform eating into your vote because they've got more of a appeal to right-wingers. And maybe the Conservative government, and maybe you're part of the problem, Sir Robert, because you're a moderate, isn't Conservative enough, and that's the issue here.
I utterly disagree. I think I've been a Tory for 40...
Record high legal migration, record high tax...
I've been a Tory for 40 years.
Terrible picture for businesses starting up in this country.
Now, the point you make about business is one that I think Andy Street reflects very well, because he's a businessman. He attracted a lot of investment into the West Midlands. He is pro-business. He's on the side of growing the economy and growing...
Pro-Palestinian marches through the streets of London, which are intimidating Jewish people, sit-ins at universities...
Look, Camilla, I absolutely agree with you on that issue, which is why I'm on the side of making sure our public order legislation is strong. I've passed legislation myself when I was in government. I'm not at all frightened of taking the necessary robust steps to keep our people safe. But there's a bigger agenda here. The more that we talk about factions and ideology, and the less we focus on business, on growth, on jobs, on housing, all those issues that actually people are talking about, which is what Andy Street reflects, then I think we become an irrelevant rump. The Conservative Party wins elections not by being soft and mushy, but by reflecting the views of the British public, by being in alliance with them. You know, the coalition that we need is with the British people. We've been the party of the nation for generations. I believe we can get back to that, but we need to focus on what people are talking about rather than focusing on ourselves.
People are talking about immigration a lot, aren't they?
They are, and I've mentioned that myself. I think that now that the legislation is through, I think that we've got to make sure the Rwanda plan works, but it's more than that. Well, it's more than that. I've always said...
Well, you haven't liked massive aspects of the Rwanda plan from the very beginning.
I was concerned about the law and making sure that the law was less fragile, so we didn't end up with the sort of legal challenges we've had in the past. But I've always said as well, it's part of a multifaceted approach. I mean, look what's happening now with Ireland. It's very interesting that the Irish government is saying what they're saying. I think we need to be robust on that and say, OK, yeah, you're sharing the challenge that we've got. Let's all work together and let's see countries like France actually have a proper returns policy as well, because these are all safe countries.
Look, I'd like the benefit of your wisdom as a former Justice Secretary just to discuss a few justice and crime matters. I've had this tribute to this lovely boy, this 14-year-old Daniel Ajorin. I mean, I can't look at an image of this kid. I've got a child a similar age, a boy. This child goes to school, he's got his headphones in, he's attacked. The proceedings are active, so we can't say more about it at this stage. Got this tribute from his parents who, I mean, the mind boggles actually to what that couple are going through right now. This kid doesn't come home from school. Looking at it objectively, not even as a journalist actually, just as a mum, I cannot understand why you can have a situation where a bloke is in the street with a samurai sword that big. And we've seen this in other cases where people have got hold of machetes, where people have got hold of zombie knives. Surely the government needs to legislate, and just as you've got a licence to carry a gun, you have to have a licence to carry a knife over a certain size.
I think that we've got a panoply of laws that, of course, make these things criminal. But it seems to me that we're in a situation now where I think your point is a very powerful one. You know, these are still far too readily available implements. They are weapons of death, as we see. And I think that, therefore, now we need to look at a system whereby supply and possession of these items is much more restricted. We did it with certain types of firearms in the aftermath of Dunblane. It was controversial, but it was right. And we haven't had an atrocity reaching that scale since 1996. As opposed to the United States, where they seem to sort of shrug their shoulders and live with that sort of thing. As a father, as a dad myself, there's no way I could live with the consequences.
But when this is such a no-brainer, why haven't we seen legislation already? Because clearly there's cross-party support for it. Yvette Cooper's, I think, in the Mirror today, the Sunday Mirror, saying, we'd ban these knives outright. Why haven't the Tories done this?
Well, to be fair, there's been a lot of work done on the banning and restriction of knives. I did work when I was in government to tighten up the minimum terms. Zombie knives now, there's an announcement only a few months ago about now a total ban on them. It seems that when you do one thing, the makers of these weapons, which is what they are, seem to try and get round the law. Well, I think now we need to future-proof the law, as we did with those so-called legal highs. Remember that? Danger a few years ago. Let's do the same thing. Let's future-proof, and let's look at a system whereby actual possession has to be registered so that we know where these items are. Nobody should be carrying a samurai sword, for God's sake, in a public place. It's an appalling prospect.
You mentioned the American picture there, obviously, where they have the right to bear arms. We saw police officers running towards danger. The bravery that some of those officers showed was extraordinary. Obviously, there's a conversation about whether the police in this country should be armed. What's your thoughts?
Look, I've always thought that it's important in our country to not walk into that default position. I think we've got very good armed police response units that do an incredible job, and I've seen them myself from my experience as a criminal lawyer. But I think generally arming the police is still something I would resist. I think what tends to happen is where you get an armed police force, you then get this arms race, and you start to see an even greater increase in the use of firearms firearms amongst criminal gangs. I mean, one of the reasons why knives are used, Camilla,
Yeah.
is that firearms are not that easy to obtain.
But a truncheon, I mean, a truncheon seems pretty 1980s. And, you know, a truncheon against a flick knife in the 1980s is something. Don't more police, I think Andy Marsh of the Police Federation has said, can we please just give tasers to the officers that want them? More tasers?
I agree with that. We've done similar things with prison officers to give them more protective mechanisms. I think that's got to be right. Obviously, they've got to be used sensibly, but the police are well used to following guidelines. Let's equip them with that type of weapon or that type of defensive implement in order to save lives.
Yeah, indeed. Well, amen to that. Sir Robert Buckland, lovely to see you this morning. Again, on a difficult morning for the Tories, so thanks for coming out.
Thank you.